Welcome to Fathers and Daughters, a podcast where we discuss important topics and current issues from a biblical perspective that are relative to fathers and daughters.
Please subscribe and email us at fdpodcast@yahoo.com with questions or episode topic suggestions. Hey everyone, welcome to Fashion Week.
You better work.
Welcome back to week 2 of the Fathers and Daughters podcast. My name is Belle.
And I am Ricardo. For those of you that came back to week 2, welcome back.
Oh, bless you, fam.
Welcome back. I hope you guys enjoyed episode 1.
You the real homies.
Where we had fun and laid out what we want this podcast to be. If you haven't listened to episode 1, go ahead and download it or go to whatever platform you use to listen to your podcast and listen to episode 1.
The episode 1's more of just like an intro, vision casting type episode. The one we're doing right now and how we'll continue to be doing podcasts is we're going to pick a topic and we just kind of roll into having a conversation about that topic and how it plays into the role of a dad and of a daughter and just of people of society. Like, I think that's a really good key factor too, is that I think as kids we forget that our parents have lives. And I think as a parent, we forget that our kids are going to grow up someday and not need us.
I agree. And during the last episode, we went through a list of topics that we are going to talk about week after week. And we decided that this week we're going to talk about fashion. All right, so let's talk about fashion.
Let's talk about clothing and accessories and shoes and handbags and headbands and all the things. Yeah. This is not an episode about like makeup. We're going to leave that for a separate topic. So this is more of just clothing and apparel, if you can use a general term for it. Hats are back, by the way. Just wanted to let you know. Hats are back.
And fanny packs?
Fanny packs are... Fanny packs have a time and a place. They are there for certain instances. They are not for everything.
No, and they're not for men over 30.
I'm so glad you realized that. Thank you, Jesus.
What I've noticed is that most dads don't have a clue about fashion, right?
Yes, to a sense.
I've seen a lot of dads still wearing their jean shorts or camo shorts.
Or their light blue jeans that are too big for them.
Yeah, but like the cargo shorts.
Oddly colored striped polo shirts.
Yeah. And
the fisherman's hats.
I mean, if you like that, that's cool.
It's not in. I want to let you know. It's not in.
It's not in.
I also think there's a big difference between dads who try to dress way too much like their kids' boyfriends.
Or moms.
Moms
that
try and dress like their daughters. I think there's a certain outfit range for every generation right now.
But just for the record, this show is not about what's in or what's out. We are going to bring out some of that stuff. But the whole idea of this episode is to talk about what the Bible says about dressing, about modesty, and how a dad and a daughter should handle that topic throughout the growing up years, right?
Yeah.
But before we get into that serious stuff...
Oh, I was going to jump straight into the Bible. It's
cool. No.
Okay.
We'll get into that.
Okay.
But I just have a couple questions for you.
Oh, I'm so excited. Okay, go.
All right. How old were you, or when was the first time that you realized that fashion was a thing?
That fashion was a thing. Okay, so this is really funny. It was the day that I walked into yours and Mom's closet, and I saw sitting on the shelf were these fuchsia pink heels. And she bought them for some event. I don't even know what they were for.
It was a marriage retreat.
Fine. Yeah. But I walked in and I remember looking at those heels and I said, oh my gosh, I want to wear those someday. And it was probably the first time that I noticed that I was like, I want to look a certain way to where I wear things that are like that. I grew up in the age where music videos were starting to turn out, like they were starting to fade out.
And trashy TV
came to MTV. Yeah. So that was kind of my generation, but I really caught the tail end of the music video era. Yeah. And so this late 90s, really, really early 2000s phase of seeing people on music videos and seeing people like Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera And even like Destiny's Child, like seeing people like that who were wearing certain types of clothing that were these bright colors, that were these fun, exciting, trendy styles. To me, I was like, that was the first time that I kind of realized, dang, I want to be like them. I want to wear those kinds of things because look at the attention they're getting from the boys in these music videos.
And that can be bad too.
Oh, it was terrible. Don't get me wrong. It was absolutely horrible.
I think we'll revisit them when we do our episode about music.
It was the first
That's
time
cool.
I noticed image. I think that was the big takeaway, was that I was like, dang, I want to look like that. I want to be at a place, because I remember trying those heels on and putting them on my feet and seeing how big they were on me and how small my feet were.
Yeah.
It's like, dang, I just want to be big enough to where I can wear these and rock it.
Yeah.
What about you?
So I grew up not having a lot of money, and a lot of the clothes that I wore were hand-me-downs from my cousins or clothes that we found at outlet centers. When I started attending school in the United States, that's when I started seeing some of the other kids wearing stuff that was trendy. And that's where I realized, okay, there's stuff that's trendy and stuff that is not. And because I couldn't afford all that trendy stuff, when I went looking for clothes with my mom, even though we went to discount outlets, I tried to kind of get the colors, and the patterns that I could turn into an outfit and kind of pretend that I was being trendy. I think that the first thing that was a name brand that I bought was a pair of Ray-Bans.
Oh.
The Wayfarer Ray-Bans that all the kids were wearing at the time. And I remember my mom saving her money because I had asked for these Ray-Bans, and eventually she saved enough money to buy me my sunglasses, and I ended up losing them the first day.
Oh, that's so sad.
And I was so heartbroken because I knew my mom sacrificed so much to buy me those Ray-Bans. So that kind of sucked. But I think I was in maybe 7th or 8th grade. Okay. And, once I started watching MTV and the fashion shows started airing on TV, I really got into fashion.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked the patterns and the designers. And I remember one of the big moments for me was in 1991 when Gianni Versace had his runway show with the supermodels.
Yeah.
Right? Like in the late 80s and early 90s, supermodels was a big thing. You had Linda Evangelista, you had Cindy Crawford, you had Naomi Campbell, Christy Turlington, and all these models that were everywhere and were making money. So to me, that was very fascinating. That was what fashion was for me when I was younger. All right, so here's another question.
Okay.
What should the rules be when it comes to clothing between a dad and a daughter? And I think this is where we're going to get into the more serious stuff, right?
What do you mean? Like, are you talking like a boundary of like what he should wear and what she should wear?
About the relationship. I mean, it's fun talking about fashion, but I really want to get into how should a dad handle deciding what the daughter should wear, and when should he back off, when should he be more assertive as to giving feedback, saying, no, that looks good, that looks bad. Tell me about your experience growing up with me, and from your perspective, what kind of dad was I when it came to clothing?
Well, I think it's a very I want to start by kind of laying down what I believe are like modesty rules. Like what's a general like the term that's out there is don't have your butt hanging out. It's a general, don't have your breasts hanging out. Like those are general rules. Don't have your tummy flaunting everywhere for everyone to see. Like there are certain rules, like if your what is showing, then put it away.
Yeah.
If your what is almost showing, it can lead to thoughts and there's so many different avenues you can take to what you're wearing. And so I lead young youth girls. I've had them for about 4 years. I lead them on Wednesday nights through youth group and through the church. And there were a few times where like we go to summer camp that I'm like, you need to go back and change because what you're wearing is not appropriate. And I see women who are just out there. Even when I was in high school, young girls walking around with their booty hanging out or their breasts hanging out. And I'm like, who did not tell you to put it away?
Right.
Honestly, growing up, I think it it was more of a mom thing. Like, mom said a lot of the but she was always there when I was purchasing things.
Right.
You weren't really there for the purchasing of the items, but she always asked the question, do you think your dad would approve? It was never I don't like that, you should not wear that. It was always the question of, do you think your dad would approve? Because I knew that you had a much, much stronger, you were going to be more vocal about it than anything else.
Yeah.
So I think growing up, there were some very defined lines of, you can't wear that because your booty's hanging out or your boobs are hanging out. Like, put it away. And it's not just to put restrictions on you. So young ladies who are listening, if your dad walks in or, catches you before you walk out of the house and says, go back, turn around, and put on something else. It is not by any means to be mean. It's not to be nasty. It's because young men are nasty. And they will think certain things if you put yourself out there in a certain way. Like, if you're walking around with your butt hanging out, that's a distraction for young men.
Mm-hmm. Amen.
It's a distraction for young men. And if you're going to continue to put yourself out there this way, you're going to be distracting young men who are who might be trying to be good and follow in a godly way. Like, that's the...
Or not. There's other men who are not
going to be
good and
who are not going to do that. Yeah.
For that.
And are looking for that, and you might be purveying a certain way of purveying yourself. I follow really kind of strict modesty rules for myself. There's a really simple way you can do this, ladies. If you stand up and you put your arm all the way down to your side, stretch it all the way out down to your side, where your thumb extends all the way is kind of a good point for me. A lot of people will say your middle finger is where you want to go. Some people will say your index finger. I even think your thumb is a good place to lie. So if you stand and you put your arm down to your thigh, that's a good place for your shorts to fall. I always use your middle finger for dresses, because dresses are a little flowy, and if it's a windy day, you just whoosh, and there it is. So I always use your middle finger. You put it down to your thigh. That's a good way of indicating.
Interesting. I didn't even know that rule existed.
Yeah, it's a good rule to have. You put your thumb all the way down to your side, and that's just a good rule to have. I also like to say, if you are wearing a bra and you come to the center point where the two pads meet in the middle, and you take your finger and you take your middle finger and you put it all the way up against your shirt, should not go lower than that, where the tip of your middle finger is. If your middle finger starts where those two pads connect, and your shirt should not go lower than that. So there are certain rules you can have. Certain households operate differently too. Certain parents allow kids to wear certain things, because the truth is, in this world, is if you're wearing something that's nasty and revealing, you're probably going to fit in a little bit more.
Or you're going to get attention too.
You're going to get attention differently.
Like, going back to those music videos, where if you're a Christian home, like our home was, you're battling against what the world says is okay. So that's going to be a challenge, right? Because the truth is that when you're a teenager, your brain is not developed yet.
Yeah.
And what you think is okay may not be okay. In the same way, just like Isabel's giving these girls rules, I want to tell the dads out there that you are responsible for raising your child. Do not be afraid to tell your kid, turn back around and put something that's decent.
Yes, preach.
I really don't think I had to do that with you.
I was more scared of you having to do that than anything else. Good. I never wanted to walk out of the house and you say, turn around, go upstairs and change.
Yeah.
I had friends in elementary school who would put in their backpack an extra set of clothing, and they would change when they got to school, and they would change when they left school to go home. And I wrestled with this for a long time. I never did that, so you don't need to worry or whatever. Yeah. But I always wondered, and I was thinking about it, and I was like, our image is so clearly defined about what others say about us. Mm-hmm. And we forget so much that that's not where we should find identity. That's not where we should find image, is in what other people say about us. But in middle school and high school, that's what the world is telling us. Even as a young adult in the world, people sometimes will compliment you on how much is revealing. Like prom. Prom and Windwitter were always the worst. Because when you were looked at as something, like you were wearing something crazy. People go out of their way to buy something extraordinary to wear to that one event. Whereas like every other day at school, not a big deal. but you intentionally go out and buy something specific to wear for that day. So automatically, whoever you see that day, you're going to look at
Yeah.
what they're wearing.
Yeah. And hooker shoes. I saw hooker shoes at graduation. I saw hooker shoes on pictures that people posted, showing their kids with their friends before prom. I was like, you can't even walk in those things.
I love heels. This is, and my mother does not like heels at all. So growing up in a household where my mom didn't really wear high heels, that pair of fuchsia heels that she had was the only pair of heels that I think I've ever seen in her closet. I am a heels person. I love a good pair of high heels. I love seeing a beautiful pair of Louis Vuittons. I love it. That's beautiful for me. But you can wear a pair of fancy heels with a modest dress.
Right.
You can wear a pair of fancy heels with a really nice jumpsuit. You can do these things in a modest way, but when you put yourself out there and you can't walk in them,
Right.
or you wear them with a very, very short dress or skirt to accentuate your legs, to make your legs look more appealing, not okay.
Yeah. I saw that at your middle school graduation.
Yeah.
Some of these children that were wearing high heels that an adult should be wearing.
Yeah.
And, every time I saw that, or I dropped you off at school and saw these girls with the short skirts with their butts hanging out, I used to think, who checks these girls when they leave their house? Is there anyone that says, no, you can't wear that to school? And the school has a dress code, quote unquote, but they rarely enforced it. I mean, they're more concerned about what's written on your t-shirt rather than if you're too revealing, right?
Yeah. But the truth is that young men will provide attention to the women who are going to reveal more. It's everywhere. Like, even with what you're wearing, there's a way to make it skimpier. There's a way to tie the shirt to where your tummy shows. There's a way to pull your shorts up enough to where your butt hangs out. There's a way to shorten your dress with bobby pins or safety pins to make it look shorter when you get to the dance. There's always a way out. There's a way to pull your shirt down farther. There's a way to cut it a little bit differently. There's always a way out. No matter what article of clothing you might buy at an Old Navy,
Yeah.
there's a way to make it skimpy. There's a way to make it nasty so that you will receive attention in that way. And I want to let young girls know who are listening to this is that your image is not defined by what other people say about you.
No. And you think it looks good, but it really doesn't.
It really doesn't. It really just looks trashy.
Yeah.
But that's not the place to be looking for that purpose of identity. That's not the place to go looking for those things, because in the end it's going to fail.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many of my friends I saw, and we'll get into this when we get into the dating podcast, but I think it's relevant right now too, is that I can't believe how many of my young friends when I was in middle school and high school, or even just girls I saw at school, who the second they started dating a boy who was giving them some attention, their attire started to change. And what they were wearing started to change. The dresses got shorter. The shirts got lower. The heels got higher, because they were being provided attention. And they thought, well, I dressed that way one time. Maybe that's why he started dating me. Maybe if I keep dressing this way, he'll keep providing that attention.
Yeah. I also know that some of you dads out there may be working a lot and may not be around when the kids leave the house, or when they come back from school, or when they go shopping, because you're busy providing for your families. But I want to encourage you to take the time and spend some time with your kid shopping or talking about clothing, because, like I said earlier, it's your responsibility that they grow up into a respectful adult.
And dads who are out there, think about it. If you sent your daughter, if your daughter is in middle school, or maybe even your daughter's a young adult, think back to when they were in middle school. What is your gut reaction if your daughter walked onto a school campus with shorts where her booty was hanging out, a crop top, and some nasty, revealing, low-cut shirt, and she walked onto campus and heard boys screaming, hollering, whistling at her, touching her inappropriately? What's that reaction? Because those are the things that are happening. That's not a fantasy. That's reality.
Yeah.
That is what's happening on school campuses that I don't think people are taking seriously.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think my goal for you growing up was to teach you to be confident about yourself enough that you didn't need to reveal your body for others to notice you.
Yeah.
if guys didn't want to notice you because you were not showing your skin, then those were not the guys that were worth it.
And it's not even just a public school thing. Like, even when we're up at church camp, I use this rule during counselor training. I told him, I said, on the night that we have banquet night and everyone gets dressed up for the last night of camp, I stand at the door with a bag of trash bags. I said, if you don't want to go back and change here, you can wear this over what you're wearing. Because the young men who are here at church camp are trying to be godly men. And you are limiting them from learning how to be better husbands by distracting them with your body.
Amen.
So as we kind of get into the whole glorifying the Lord part of the podcast, I did some research. In no way am I a Bible scholar. I have not even stepped foot in seminary. But I've known this verse for a really long time. And it's 1 Timothy 2:9. But I want to, it's a very famous verse that it's in a lot of, women's godly women books or women in ministry type things. But I want to go back even to 1 Timothy 2:8, and I'll read it out loud. And so Paul is writing this letter to Timothy because at the time Paul was kind of ministering to Timothy and kind of took him under his wing. Paul was actually going to another church at another location, and he sent Timothy to the church of Ephesus. And he was writing these letters as commands to the church. Yeah. And so he wrote this, and he said, therefore, I want men everywhere to pray, lifting up holy hands without anger. So the very first part of the thing is to men. So in no way do I want this to think this is just Paul writing to Timothy about women. Paul's addressing everyone in this letter too. And then he goes on to say, I also, keyword also in there, want the women to dress modestly. And I kind of read that at first, and I was like, you could even just stop it right there. And he could have stopped right there, but instead he decided to go on and start to give some other examples. And he said, I also want women to dress modestly with decency and propriety, adorning themselves with elaborate hairstyles or gold or pearls or expensive clothing. And so he's talking about women not needing these things to be beautiful. He wants us to be modest. And it's weird that I read this and it says with braided hair. My hair's actually braided right now. So elaborate hairstyles, my hair's braided right now. These mean different things now. Right. Because back then they didn't have crop tops or stripper heels. So these things mean different things. There were certain rules about cutting hair and, so there were different types of rules now, back then. So you can even take some of these things to mean something different nowadays, elaborate hairstyles or with gold or pearls or expensive clothing. Yeah. You can kind of relate these different things to things like name brand clothing or, really expensive jewelry even still. But to not adorn yourselves with these things because that's not what's necessary. So then he goes on into verse 10 and he says, so if you go back to verse 9, but to not with elaborate hairstyles, gold, pearls, or expensive clothes, but with good deeds appropriate for women to profess to worship the Lord. So what's cool about this is that he provides an alternate to wanting to do these things. He very easily could have just stopped at be modest. He very easily could have just stopped at providing examples for what's us not to wear. But instead, I love that Paul went into saying, but adorn yourselves with good deeds. Meaning, use your personality, use your spiritual gifts with providing good actions for others. And doing things to praise the Lord with good deeds. Your kindness and your heart and being caring. And he doesn't say just to do good deeds. He says, but to profess to worship the Lord. Right. He's not saying go be a good person to just be a good person. He says go be a good person, do good deeds, be kind, be gentle, be loving to worship God. Yeah. And I think that's really, really fantastic.
It's the whole thing about our bodies being the temple, right? So we have to use our bodies to worship God just like people used to do at the temple. So if we're going to adorn our temple that we used to worship God, it has to be honoring to him. So I also looked up some scripture that I think complements 1 Timothy very well.
Are we going to get into Bible wars? Like, are we just going to start
wars? No,
battling scripture? That's my competitive spirit. I'm sorry. I'm like, oh shoot, fine. Let me pull up another piece of scripture. I'm just kidding. Okay.
So this is 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 3 and 4. Don't be concerned about the outward beauty of fancy hairstyles, expensive jewelry, or beautiful clothes. You should clothe yourself instead with the beauty that comes from within, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is so precious to God. That complements what Paul was saying to Timothy very well, right? And what we should be teaching our daughters. That what's inside is what's important, not what you're wearing on the outside.
And so I love what you said, that it's not about what's on the outside, it's about what's on the inside. That's a really nice thing to say. And it's in the Bible, and it's easy, and it's there. It's hard to live out, especially as a young woman, where all of your friends are getting attention because they're dressed a certain way, and maybe you weren't allowed to buy those clothes. I had a lot of friends who wore Hollister shorts. It was like a thing when I was in middle school, was to wear Hollister shorts. One, we couldn't really afford to shop at Hollister because it was super expensive.
Yeah.
And two, Hollister shorts were very, very short. And I remember the day that Mom and I went back to school shopping, and she said, you can get one thing from Hollister. We had gone and done all my shopping, and she said, we saved up some money, and you can go and buy one thing from Hollister. I remember walking into Hollister, and the moods are all dark and gloomy and hip and trendy, and everything's folded nicely. And whereas like the sales section of Old Navy, it looks like a bomb went off.
Right.
It looks like Black Friday all the time in there. And so I remember walking into Hollister and just feeling this overwhelming sense of really being cool. And I remember walking over to the shorts section, and I remember feeling so convicted. And I was a middle schooler, but I remember standing there looking down at the shorts and going, I don't really want these. I want these because other people want these. And we bought them anyway.
The booty shorts?
The booty shorts. And we bought them anyway because I let my sense of pride get in the way of my true knowledge of what my identity was supposed to be.
Interesting. I don't even remember those booty shorts. Did you even wear the
Nope,
booty shorts?
they sat in my closet. They sat in my drawer for years, and I felt horrible because they were like $30 shorts that I never wore. But just knowing that I owned them was enough. But I could never bring myself to wear them because I was so convicted of it.
Don't feel bad. That money was well worth it just by
just knowing that I was convicted by just knowing that we had this topic to talk about today was worth it for you.
Really good.
Oh, good.
So as a woman now, because
thank you.
Because you're not a kid anymore.
I'm so glad you realized that.
I think you're a respectable woman.
Thank you.
Who is confident about yourself, and you have worth. And you don't need your clothing to give you worth.
Can I answer your question for you?
Hold on. You dress very beautifully.
Oh, thank you.
And I appreciate that.
That was gross. I loved it.
I don't want people to think that if you have self-worth and you're confident about yourself, doesn't mean you don't have to look...
You just dress like a pig.
Right. Doesn't mean you have to look nice. But you do a very good job of dressing very nice and modest. And you look beautiful.
Thank you.
But yes, you know what I was going to ask you. As a woman now, what would you tell fathers out there about how they should be with their...
It's really hard. When you dress modestly, sadly, you look different.
Yeah.
You stand out like a sore thumb when all of your friends are in booty shorts and your shorts go down to your knees. It's hard. So I want to tell dads...
the homely girl.
You're the homely girl. Yeah, she was homeschooled. Or, daddy's a pastor. Like...
But you didn't look homely. I mean, I think we did a good job of letting you be...
creative in some ways.
And,
yes.
And be close to being trendy without being out there.
And that's what I want to tell dads. I want you to know it's really hard. It's a tough world out there with young men looking for these things. And it's hard as a young woman to not want to provide those to receive the attention that they're going to give. So just know that if your daughter is dressing that certain way, it's not to disrespect you. Well, for the most part. If not, it's a whole separate conversation. We'll talk about disrespect in another one. But it's because she's looking to find attention somewhere. You can be the source of that attention. If she's receiving it somewhere, maybe she won't be looking for it somewhere else. And so I want to tell dads is that it's very easy to scream and shout and say, go change, go take that off. Maybe go with her the next time you go shopping.
That's a good one. I was going to say that too. I see a lot of dads that when the dad and the wife go shopping with the daughter, or when the dad and the daughter just go shopping, he doesn't want anything to do with shopping. And he goes out and sits outside, plays on his phone. And I think it's very important that the dad goes in there and sees the outfit changes and gives feedback. And when he sees something that is nice, to say, you look beautiful in that. And just say, yeah, I really like that. Or no, you're not going to wear that. Pick something else.
If you're going to use the excuse that you have, quote, no sense of style, that's bull. I'm going to call it right now. It's bull. Okay? Don't give me that crap. You can go in there and have the worst sense of style. Okay? You can have the absolute most worst sense of style. But if you're in there and affirming her in whatever she picks out, as long as it's modest, she's going to take that as affirmation.
Yeah.
Just letting her know, hey, that's a little short. How about we try something that's a little longer? How about this one? You liked this color. Let's try this. Feed off of what she says she likes.
Yeah.
Because as much as you might not see it or believe it sometimes, there were a lot of things that I found that you liked, Dad, when I was a kid, that I was like, oh, he likes that. I'm going to figure out everything there is about that to make sure that I like it too.
Oh, interesting.
There's a lot of things, different types of music, different types of a lot of things. And I ended up really liking a lot of the things that I found. But it's this bonding that I was like, he likes that. Shoot, I'm going to go find something that's just like it. I'm going to learn everything there is to know about that. That relates to clothing too. If she finds something that you might like, maybe you love the color green and you find a beautiful green shirt for her to wear. You might come home and her whole closet might be full of green shirts. You don't know until you try.
And it goes the other way, too.
Oh,
if we have that relationship, you're going to do everything possible not to disappoint me if you know what disappoints me, right? Okay.
To kind of close out, I want to tell a really cute story. So my dad's crazy about Hawaiian shirts. He loves Ren Spooners is the brand to have right now for you. He has way too many of them. Fun fact, way too many of them. He has a lot. What's the number?
Shout out to Ren Spooner.
Please sponsor our podcast. What's the number count that you have? If you don't know the exact, can you give me a rough estimate?
Probably up in the 60s.
That's crap. I think it's higher. We'll go count after this. But he has a lot of Hawaiian shirts. But before he started collecting Ren Spooners, he has this blue and white Hawaiian shirt. And it's not branded. It's not any fancy name brand.
I actually bought it at the swap meet.
Yeah, it's an old, kind of dingy, but it's got the softest material.
Yeah, it does.
And and because you've had it for so long, it constantly just smells like you. No matter how many times we wash it, it smells like you. And that is my favorite article of clothing you ever had. And it's weird because you collect name brand Hawaiian shirts, and the one shirt that I love the most is the one that's not branded.
And the only reason why I keep it is because I know you love it.
Because you know I love it. And it's kind of an obnoxious color. I won't lie. It's a very like neon blue, but it's soft and it smells like you. And I even think it's a little big for you. Yeah. Like it's a little too big.
Yeah, it was that late 90s, early 2000s
like
rayon
soft,
material.
Yeah. And the day that I left for Turkey, I spent a year abroad in a foreign country serving as a nanny. And the day that I left was one of the most horrible days of my life because it was just so sad. I was so excited to go, but I was so sad to leave my family for 6 months. And I remember I didn't notice anything all day. I was just kind of oblivious to everything the whole morning. But I remember getting to the airport and we had checked in and we were sitting and I remember looking at you from across the side of the airport and I didn't notice it, but I looked over and you were wearing the shirt that I loved. And it didn't even occur to me until that moment when I slowed down, I looked over and I saw it and I was like, he's wearing that shirt just for me.
Just for
you
you.
hadn't worn that shirt in years. Maybe 6 or 7 years you hadn't worn that shirt. But I looked over and I just knew, and it brought me to tears. And that was something that kickstarted my crying that day, was because I looked over and I saw that you were wearing that shirt just for me because you knew I loved that shirt and it smelled like your cologne. And I'll never forget that goodbye hug you gave me because I could feel the material on the shirt, and I could smell you. And just knowing that you wore that shirt for me meant the freaking world.
I'll wear that to your wedding, okay?
Hell no. Hell no. That's not even funny to joke about.
Talking about your experience in Turkey, that's a whole different.
Oh, we'll talk about Turkey.
That's a whole different podcast. But when we talk about missions and the time you spend in Turkey, let's bring this topic.
Oh,
back
for sure,
up,
it's a whole new
at least
thing.
For a little bit, because the way you're expected to dress there is totally different, right?
So even just walk into a building, you have to wear a hijab, like all the things. We'll get into it.
Yeah.
Anyway, this has been week 2 of the F&D podcast.
So
Fathers
what's going
and
to be our
Daughters
next
podcast.
topic?
I don't know.
Music. Can we do music?
Okay, music will be our next. You're
Music.
going to lose it. Okay, music is going to be our next podcast. So different types of music that's appropriate, music that's inappropriate, when to let your kids starting to listen to more inappropriate music.
Lyrics.
Different types of lyric choices.
Dancing.
Dancing. Oh, I think you're going to be really interested to hear what we have to say about that.
Remember that prom we DJ'd for the Christian high school?
That was one of the nastiest, most raunchiest proms, and I went to a public school.
I felt dirty after I...
Yeah, I felt really gross after that, but
anyways, yeah,
that's going to be our next
we're gonna
podcast.
Talk about music. If you have any questions, comments, or topic ideas, make sure you email us.
Or if you disagree with something, I'd love to hear someone disagree with something we have to say.
Really?
I love confrontation.
Oh.
So this is great. So even if you have concerns, like, let us know. Let's talk about it.
I tend to avoid confrontation.
I know.
We'll learn about that when we get into the...
When we talk about the Enneagram,
Okay.
that'll be one of our weeks too. So thank you so much for listening. Hope you guys tune in next week.
Thank you so much, and sachet.
Shantae.
Thank you for listening to the Fathers and Daughters podcast, a Musket Entertainment production. For questions, comments, or topic ideas, email fdpodcast@yahoo.com. Please subscribe and tune in every week for new episodes.